Bases Loaded 2 is an all-time classic. I will never get tired of blowing high fastballs past hitters. The pitching control in this game is simply out of this world. It's also a lot faster than the first game. The fielding, however, is problematic. And so is the base running. Well, there's the good and the bad. And overall, I'm honestly not convinced that this is an improvement over the first Bases Loaded game. But let's take a deep dive first to see what we can find out. So as you probably already know, Bases Loaded 2 was originally a Japanese game. It was called Moero Pro Yakyuu 88 Ketaiban, which means something like Burning Pro Baseball 88 Decision Version. This game came out in 1988, which helps explain that part of the name. So just like the first Moero Pro Yakyuu game, you choose from one of 10 teams that represent the 10 teams in Nippon Pro Baseball. And as you can see here, the game was unmistakably Japanese in its presentation. That helps explain the fielding angle, which is infamous for its side perspective. If you're not used to watching Japanese baseball on television, you've probably got no idea why in the world they would use such an awkward view, so let me show you why. Alright, this clip comes from a late season 1988 Japanese baseball game. Notice the camera angle when the ball is put in play. You see the same side view camera angle and broadcast from the Koshien tournament around this time. The more Japanese baseball games you watch, the more that you'll see that side angle for fielding plays. It can be kind of jarring at first, but it's not so bad once you get used to it. And that's the best way to understand Bases Loaded 2's fielding angle. It's all about recreating the television experience for the player. But that doesn't mean that the game is necessarily well done. In fact, fielding in this game seems to have largely been an afterthought. Fielding isn't exactly one of the strengths of the first Bases Loaded. In the second game, though, it feels like things have gotten worse. The frame rate is bad. Actually, this reminds me of fielding in Konami's Exciting Baseball, and not in a good way. Bases Loaded 2's fielding just feels so disjointed. And there are times when the ball goes faster than the camera. The biggest nightmare is anything hit to the outfield. Actually, anything that makes you have to field in Bases Loaded 2 is going to be a problem, and that's not a good thing. Compare it to Bad News Baseball, which I think has the best fielding system out of any NES baseball game. As you can see, the animation in Bad News Baseball is smooth, the camera angle is clear, the characters move quickly, they can throw. Bases Loaded 2 feels like a major step back. In fact, I think the original Famista has better fielding overall. Famista had better fielding even though your players can't throw the ball across the diamond. Bases Loaded 2 is just a pain to field in. But it's not the fielding system that makes this game legendary. No, it's the pitching system. And pitching in Bases Loaded 2 is like a dream. Pitching is the most fun part of this game. There's nothing more satisfying than blowing a high fastball past the hitter in a key situation. Sometimes you get it wrong, of course. But more often than not, you'll get the hitter swinging and missing. The computer has a real hard time with hitting in this game. And that's kind of ironic, since hitting actually is not quite as hard as you might think. It does take a little bit of practice, but once you get the hang of it, you'll find that it's actually pretty easy. The hard part is learning how to time pitches. The computer will always throw at least one pitch straight down the middle in each at-bat. You want to check the catcher's mitt first, of course. You also want to listen for the sound to get a feel for the speed of the pitches. Once you get the timing down, though, hitting isn't so hard. Like I said, it's the fielding that's the problem. Of course, you do need to take this game in context. This game came out right before the big rush of Famicom baseball releases in Japan, and I would say that it fares sort of well against the competition. You already know about Famista and Famista 87, of course. And I've already mentioned Exciting Baseball. A game called Best Play Pro Yaku came out a few months before this one. This was a simulation game. Think of it as an early version of Out of the Park. Except, of course, that the gameplay graphics look a lot better than Out of the Park Baseball, at least to me. Anyway, this game is special. I'm really looking forward to diving deep into this one. Kyukoku Hairiki Stadium came out a few months before the second Moero Pro Yaku game. And it's okay. I like the pitching angle, but the ball seems to travel really slowly. And then there was Super Real Baseball 88, which came out about a month before the Jalico game. Stay away from this clunker. This game is probably worse than Exciting Baseball, believe it or not. In fact, LJN's Major League Baseball looks good in comparison. I mean, you have to push a button to pick up the ball. That's how bad the fielding is. So in that context, Moero Pro Yaku 88 really isn't all that bad. But it doesn't look all that great when compared with the first game. Now, the North American version of Bases Loaded 2 didn't come out until sometime in spring 1990. By this time, some of the best baseball games of all time had already been released on the NES, and that might be one of the reasons why this game is not quite as popular as it otherwise probably would have been. Wikipedia will tell you that Bases Loaded 2 came out in January 1990, almost a full year and a half after the Japanese version came out. This is based on this old list of releases from the Nintendo website. However, the evidence that I've seen is that this game didn't really come out until April 1990 in North America. Like a lot of games at that time, this seems to have been delayed. Perhaps this was delayed by the artificial chip shortage that Nintendo was responsible for. Now, Nintendo was absolutely huge back in January 1990. This was a major cultural phenomenon. Over a quarter of all US households had a Nintendo Entertainment System, which is mind-boggling. retailers talked about not being able to keep the system in stock, something that should sound familiar to those of you who follow Nintendo today. This was back in the glory days when there were only about 100 games available for the system. Notice that Bases Loaded is mentioned by name here, but that there's nothing about the second game. You'd expect to see at least something about the second game if it had just come out, right? Well, there's nothing. Not there, nor in any other United States or Canadian newspaper in January 1990. This early February 1990 advertisement from a Reno, Nevada newspaper mentions the first Bases Loaded game, but not the second. And that ad even included the ridiculous Power Glove. And in this Cleveland area advertisement from mid-March 1990, the so-called Nintendo Power Walk was featured. These were previews of games that hadn't come out yet. Bases Loaded 2 is listed among the new games being previewed. And by the way, the general admission price of almost $10 per person seems really high to me. The first newspaper ad I could find for Bases Loaded 2 is this one from Newsday in New York City on April 23, 1990. That's a long time after January 1990. And one of the problems that Bases Loaded 2 faced was the stiff competition it was up against. RBI Baseball came out in summer 1988, of course. But don't forget about games like Tecmo Baseball. Tecmo Baseball's batter-pitcher matchup is similar to Bases Loaded, though it's not quite as satisfying. However, the fielding system is much better. Baseball Stars was also out almost a full year before Bases Loaded 2. Dusty Diamond's All-Star Softball was released just a month or two later. The same is true of Bad News Baseball. And Baseball Simulator 1000 came out at just about the same time. Compared to those games, the fielding mechanism in Bases Loaded 2 feels really outdated. And then there's that Biorhythm thing, which honestly is just really strange to me. So the English language manual explains that there are 3 performance ratings: physical, sensitivity, and intellectual, and all 3 can impact the way that the player plays. These are the ratings that determine how pitchers perform. They also have a lot to do with how well batters hit when they make contact. And the general idea here is that players can go through streaks and slumps. But the problem, of course, is that you need to keep track of this for every single player on your team. And that's really tedious. I mean, it was an ambitious idea, sure, and I think that Jaleco really put this in because they needed something to differentiate this game from all the other Famicom baseball games that were already out there. But it's not quite as much fun as, for example, the player development system in Baseball Stars. This feels overly complex. And really, we could have used less emphasis on that system and more on, the fielding system. The batter-pitcher matchup really is good in this game. But fielding is a major league problem. It was honestly better in the first game. Even the sound in the Japanese version is not as good as the first one. The first game has some of the most memorable 8-bit baseball sounds anywhere. The sounds in the Japanese version of the second game are a lot more generic. Overall, while this is not a horrible game, this sequel is a major disappointment. But you can't win them all, I guess. The nice thing is that Bases Loaded 2 is a lot faster. I mean, I can play a full game in about a half hour. If you took the fielding system from Bad News Baseball and combined it with the pitching system from Bases Loaded 2, I really think you'd have the perfect game. Well, at least they tried.